What happens when the most powerful spiritual figure on earth, dressed in spotless white, surrounded by guards and tradition, suddenly walks off the path, not for royalty, but for a crying stranger? Why did Pope Francis, who represents centuries of sacred protocol, abandon all structure to wrap his arms around a man whose name no one even knew? And what if that one unscripted moment, no microphone, no ceremony held more truth about the nature of grace than 1,000 homilies combined? Imol, when the world expected order and got grace. The sun hung gently over Vatican City that morning, casting soft shadows through the columns of St. Peter's Square. It was a Wednesday, a day of tradition, of structure, of order. Pope Francis was doing what every pope before him had done, waving to the faithful, blessing pilgrims, smiling for photos, every movement timed, every step rehearsed. He walked the path carved out for him, lined by guards, choreographed by protocol. And then, something broke the rhythm. His eyes landed on a man, not a politician, not a priest, not even a child waving a flag. Just one man, a face swollen with grief, shoulders hunched from invisible weight, eyes red not from sun, but sorrow. He didn't call out, he didn't move. He simply stood there exposed in his pain. And the Pope saw him, truly saw him. And what happened next stunned even the most seasoned Vatican aides. Francis stopped, in the middle of his route, in the middle of thousands of onlookers. He turned, and he walked straight toward the man. Security hesitated. Assistants froze. Cameras scrambled. But Francis didn't falter, because in that single moment, mercy spoke louder than the system that had trained him. This was not part of the plan, but grace rarely is. And as his white robes moved off the path and into the arms of the forgotten, something timeless stirred in the hearts of everyone watching. And that was only the beginning. After stepping off the path, Pope Francis stood face to face with a man who wasn't supposed to be there. And yet, in that moment, it was clear. This meeting was no accident. The man who didn't belong in the plan. No one knew his name. No one had called him forward. He wasn't on the list. He didn't hold a ticket. He didn't come draped in faith or wrapped in ceremony. He came because something inside him was breaking. He had lost his job, his family, his footing in the world. And with each loss, something deeper unraveled. He didn't come as a pilgrim. He came as a man who had nothing left. He stood there not with a sign or a plea, but with the unbearable weight of silence. He was, in every way, the man who didn't belong in the plan. But the Pope saw him. Not because someone pointed him out, not because he fit into the schedule, but because something in the Pope's heart heard what no one else could. A silent cry, a soul whispering, "Please see me." Francis didn't ask his religion. He didn't ask what he'd done or failed to do. He didn't ask if the man had prayed or believed. He asked something deeper, not with his mouth, but with his eyes. Asterisk, asterisk. What are you carrying? Asterisk, asterisk. It was a gaze that stripped away shame. A question that didn't demand words, just truth. And something in that stranger shattered. The walls, the pride, the distance, all gone. In that one moment, the world's most recognized religious leader reminded us, before doctrine, before dogma, before any declaration of belief, there is grief. There is loss, and there is a longing to be seen through it. In the moment when eyes met and unspoken pain was felt, the world paused, and then something unforgettable happened. The Pope opened his arms. No hesitation, no caution, just welcome. And the mantis stranger to everyone but grief collapsed into them. He didn't hold back. He didn't adjust himself for cameras. He didn't cry quietly, like society teaches men to do. He broke, fully. His body shook with sobs that had waited too long to be seen. He wept with the force of someone who had kept everything in and finally found a space soft enough, human enough, holy enough to fall apart. There were no words, no rehearsed gestures, just the sound of tears soaking into white fabric. And Francis? He didn't flinch. He didn't gently pat the man's back like one might do to politely signal enough. He didn't try to end the moment to move on with the day's plan. He stayed. Firm, steady, still. One hand around the man's back, one hand on his head, as if to say without speaking, "You are held, you are safe, you are not too much." Time, for those few seconds, felt like it had stopped breathing, because this wasn't just a hug. It was a breach in the wall that separates power from pain. It was a crack in the choreography of sacred routines where compassion bled through and became the sermon. People around them watched in silence, some with tears in their eyes. Because this was not comfort. It was communion, the kind that can't be scripted, the kind that changes you not because of what was said, but because of what was felt. And as the embrace lingered, long past what protocol would allow, it became clear. This wasn't just a moment for the man. It was a moment for the world. A reminder of what real compassion looks like. Uncomfortable, raw, slow, and utterly transformative. But the hug was only part of the story. What Pope Francis said afterward would reveal an even deeper truth about love, presence, and the power of being interrupted. After the tears had quieted and the embrace gently ended, the question echoed through newsrooms, churches, and living rooms around the world. Why did he do it? Why would the Popea man, surrounded by ceremony, protected by protocol, followed by cameras, break form, break routine, and walk straight into a stranger's pain? When asked, Pope Francis didn't give a prepared statement. He didn't speak about optics or PR or public duty. He offered just one line: "We must be interrupted." 7 words, quiet, unshakable. Because love that cannot be interrupted is not love. Real love does not live in rigid schedules. It doesn't ask for appointments. It doesn't wait for clean moments or camera angles. It shows up in the middle of the mess. That hug may not have altered church law. It didn't make headlines for its theological complexity, but it changed something deeper. It cracked open a space between authority and humanity. It showed the world that mercy is not a concept to be preached from a pulpit. It's a choice we make in motion. That moment, unscripted and sacred, reminded us that God doesn't always wait inside stained glass sanctuaries. He doesn't only whisper in candlelit chapels or within the pages of Scripture. Sometimes, He arrives in the space between two strangers, in the breaking of protocol, in the stillness of an embrace, in the softness of a heart willing to be detoured by someone else's sorrow. And if the Pope, arguably the busiest, most watched man in religion, can pause, can turn, can let himself be interrupted, what does that say about how we move through our lives? We're taught from childhood to follow the line. Stay in step. Don't interrupt. Stick to the schedule. Even as adults, we carry this code into our work, our relationships, even our spirituality. Efficiency becomes a virtue, precision a value. But what if the most sacred moments of our lives happen not in the plan, but in the pause? What if the holiest thing you do today isn't a task to complete, but a soul to stop for? What if someone's breaking point is actually your invitation to bend? The embrace we witnessed between Pope Francis and the grieving man wasn't a gesture of pity. It was an invitation, a whispered truth passed not in words, but in presence. That holiness is not sterile. It is not confined behind marble altars or holy texts. It lives in interruptions. It lives in those messy human moments when everything inside you says, "I'm too busy," and love replies, "Then slow down." Holiness does not wear perfection. It wears compassion. It wears eyes that soften when they see pain. It wears hands that are willing to get dirty. Because true mercy never flinches at brokenness. It draws closer. It leans in. It reaches out not because it must, but because it can't not. And that's the lesson. That to live a mindful life is not to avoid the chaos. It is to carry a stillness so steady, so rooted in love, that even chaos feels seen. What Pope Francis did that day wasn't just about kindness. It wasn't about image, headlines, or applause. It wasn't even just about the man he embraced. It was about reminding the world of something we've slowly forgotten, something that used to live in us naturally before speed and structure took over. That no one is invisible, that pain has no hierarchy, and that to witness someone suffering and walk away is to abandon something sacred in ourselves. But when we pause, when we step off the path, when we let our lives be interrupted by another person's ache, that's where compassion becomes more than a concept. That's where the sacred begins. We often ask, where is God in all this chaos? But maybe the more urgent question is, where are we? Asterisk. Where are we when grief walks beside us on the subway? When loneliness hides behind a cashier's smile? When someone's heartbreak passes us by in silence because we're too focused on what's next? Pope Francis didn't need permission. He didn't check the schedule. He stopped. He saw. He stayed. And that simple act became a sermon without words. A sermon that said, love isn't efficient. It isn't sterile. It's not always polished or well-timed. But it is strong. Strong enough to halt tradition. Strong enough to cross the lines we've drawn. Strong enough to say to a stranger, you are worth this moment. And maybe that's what we're truly here for. Not to pass through life untouched, but to be interrupted, to be rerouted by someone else's pain, to turn protocol into presence. Because real holiness isn't found in flawless plans. It's found in the sacred pause. End quote. If this story touched something in you, we'd love to hear about it. Leave a comment. Your words might be the warmth someone else needs today. Subscribe to Mindful Way Television, ***, where each story is a soft landing place for the human spirit. And if you're still here, your next journey begins with our next video where compassion, courage, and stillness meet again. Thank you for walking this path with us. And always remember, you don't have to fix the world. Just don't walk past it. ***.